It's natural to want a loving connection with your own parents. And this can be so conflicted for people whose parents, one or both of them, have either abused or neglected or criticized or undermined you. Now, when you were a child, you had no choice but to depend on and crave approval from your parents. As you grow up, though, and you no longer depend on them for your very survival, it can be hard to know what to do when the parent who hurt you keeps hurting you. Even if you love them, even if you wish you could have a good relationship, keeping them in your life can make it a lot harder to heal. And after you go no contact and you still feel pain about not seeing them, what are the reasons to consider that you might go ahead and restore contact versus what are the reasons to just keep the no contact in place? In this video, I respond to a letter from a man I'll call Alex, and he writes, Dear Anna, my stepdad has been recently pushing harder for me to reconnect with my mother, who I and the rest of my siblings have been no contact with for a minimum of 2 years. I was the last one to cut her off. And I'm wondering if he might be right and I blew the whole situation out of proportion and should reconnect to apologize. All right, I've got my fairy pencil out to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading. But let's see what's going on in Alex's life here. He says, I am the oldest of 2 that were raised together, but third of 4 total, the first 2 by a different man. And my biological parents are divorced. They split right before I turned 5, and my mother met my now stepdad 2 years later, and they've been together ever since. I grew up really close to my mother compared to my stepdad and peers. I was sort of an isolated child who had a lot of difficulty fitting in. I've found out as an adult that I'm a high-functioning autistic. I grew up very smart and sporty, and I remember my mother used to love bragging about me, and we were very close. She used to call me her guardian angel because her pregnancy with me convinced her to continue living. Well, that feels funny, huh? That's odd. He says, we were so close, she would tell me about the abuse she'd been through as a child and adult in vivid detail, some of which still haunts me to this day. And I've recognized now that it was sort of inappropriate for us to have engaged in that kind of conversation. It can be, that's for sure. As I became a teenager, I began exploring myself and I came out as transgender. She ignored me for a week after I came out, to the point of talking to others in the room to tell me things, despite me sitting right beside her. Oh, dear. And when I finally got her to talk to me, she said she was coming to terms with loving a murderer. A murderer. Because I had, quote, murdered her daughter. And this was devastating to me, and we continued to be at odds where she would ignore me when I'd bring up anything LGBT related or even when I underperformed at school. Eventually, she seemed to come around, and over time, we seemed to repair this relationship into adulthood, and she respected my choice in representing who I am. I was also in therapy working through my own mental health, and part of what I was encouraged and wanted to do was to ask for closure on this piece with an apology. When I brought it up, though, she had a complete meltdown to me about how you just think I'm a terrible mother despite everything I do for you. And the work we'd made to repair our relationship completely deteriorated, and once more I felt completely isolated. She would ignore and misgender me at times in a way that felt intentional, though she'd tell me that wasn't the case after all. I still struggle now with seeing how could it not be intentional. Eventually, through talks with my own therapist and trying for 8 months to enforce boundaries for my mental health, not to mention finding out that she'd cut me off from my older sisters after we connected and cut me off from contacting my father, who I'd been equally close with when I was younger, it became clear that she wasn't going to listen and respect this, and I asked my therapist about cutting her off, which she stated she'd support any decisions I'd make, but was careful not to give me a definite yes, do it or don't do it. So I did it. Now, nearly 2 years later, my stepdad, who I kept in contact with, insists I need to reach out to my mother again. He says she has no idea why I would have cut her off. Perhaps it wasn't the most mature of me, but I sent her a lengthy text at the time outlining the boundaries that had been crossed and that I was no longer going to be speaking to her due to them, and even met with him days later to elaborate on things. he said she was confused on, and that it feels like it would be beneficial for both of us to attend family therapy. I don't know why, but just the thought of going into the same room as her terrifies me anymore. Part of me is worried she'll convince the therapist I'm making a big deal over nothing. There we go. That's the core fear. She did this to several therapists in my childhood. Okay, I guess after Alex came out trans, and take me away from the one therapist who I felt finally listened to me. But I think a bigger part of me is terrified cutting her off was the wrong choice, and I've done more harm than good, like my stepdad tells me I have. I keep thinking maybe everything wasn't as bad as I keep telling myself it was, and I've created an echo chamber in my own head. My therapist at the time recommended to me your channel when I was terrified of a CPTSD diagnosis. It made it all feel less scary, and I relate to a lot of your content. So now I'd like to ask your opinion on the situation. Do you see any good in attempting to reconnect with my mother? Or do you think that I or she may not be ready yet? And that is from Alex. Okay, Alex. Wow. What a moment in your life. And I totally respect there's no easy answer here. And I'm really glad that you have a therapist who recognizes that this is not like an obvious yes/no question, but it could be a question that evolves one way or the other over time. And that's what I love about boundaries. Like a no contact is a strong boundary, but you don't have to set it for life. You can set it for a fixed period of time. You can set it for an indefinite period of time. So right now, it doesn't sound like it's coming from you internally initiating this. It was your stepdad showing up saying, you really need to talk to your mom. It sounds more like your mom would really like to talk to you. And she's too, I don't know, embarrassed or lacks inner power to articulate what she wants. Like, I have sympathy. Like, if your child comes out as trans, it's a big deal, and I would expect it takes some adjustment, and there's a lot of mistakes along the way. But what I'm hearing in here, this high drama thing of like, well, you murdered my daughter. There's something not right with that. If she cried, if she expressed to you that she was grieving who she thought you were and then finding out who you were, if she was slow to even come around and support who you now are, well, that's one thing. A person deserves a little bit of time to come around. If they can be direct and just say, I'm sad, I'm confused, I fear that I did something wrong, whatever her fear might be, so she could express that. But instead, it's this thing where it's like, you murdered my daughter. That's so, I don't know, like a teenage girl or something. And I don't like putting teenage girls down. I never liked it when I was a teenager, the way people just assume teenage girls are trivial and whatnot. But it just seems very immature. It seems emotionally immature. And it also seems way too much about her. And that ideally, a parent, your mother, your own mother, the ideal. I mean, we don't all have the ideal, and so we can't really compare who we got against an imaginary ideal of who we think they should be. They are who they are. But it would have been nice for you if you had a mom who you could talk through this stuff as you were figuring it out and as you were deciding to take steps to change that about your life, that she could have really helped you think and support you and help you, decide what pacing you want to do this at. And it'd be a nice time to have a mom. I can imagine that as a teenager, something so big is very hard to navigate on your own. And I don't have this in my past, but I have other things that were so hard to navigate on my own. And so sometimes I had to do it hastily or clumsily or end up learning through trial and error things that, my imaginary hypothetical parent really could have helped me with. So I did get the help I got. I didn't get the help I didn't get. And I feel that for those of us with complex PTSD, it's important to kind of accept reality, that these comparisons to a hypothetical, to this imaginary version of a parent, like I know some people appear to have that, but each person is really living in their own family, and each family is unique. And some of us have parents with some serious flaws where it goes nowhere for us to keep imagining, but they should be like this, but they should support me. They should come around. They should speak to me directly. that it's like, yeah, but they don't. They just don't. And so the best thing we can do is start to deal with how that feels and start making decisions. All right, so therefore, how do I want to do my life? Now, for now, it totally makes sense to me. All this drama and this constant sort of her relapsing into, the fainting couch over all of this, I can see how you need distance from it. And I also hear that you're conflicted, that you love her, that you would like to have her in your life. This thing where maybe you made too big a deal out of nothing, I don't think you did, but I think that just in any kind of conflict or difficulty we have with other people, I actually think it's healthy what you're saying. It's like, well, perhaps I'm making too big a thing out of it, but there comes a time when we are clear what we're doing. You're not there yet, but it's okay. Once you're clear, it's like, I'm not making too big a deal. This is a non-negotiable for me. When that's the case, there comes a time and a place where we can say quite definitely, like, I'm not going to do this, or I will come back if. But most things in life are not that tidy, are they? It's we go through it with this feeling of like, I can't deal with this person, I miss them, all at the same time. And so sometimes I think time is our friend, especially if we're using time, as it sounds like you are, to be growing through what we haven't figured out yet, to be trying. I think that life favors those of us who try. And so even when we haven't figured it out yet, when we're trying, we're collecting information, we're starting to understand ourselves, even if all we're understanding is what we don't understand, and we're figuring out what we need. Often, after some time, I think there is room for people like you or me to have contact with difficult people. But what we need is more strength inside. We need more clarity about, like, who am I? What are the battles worth fighting in my life? And what was just a feeling I had temporarily, and that I would later feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't, fought somebody so hard about something, because then I ended up feeling differently about it, or seeing the truth in what they said. So it is a good idea to go through life being considerate, thoughtful, working on ourselves, hurting people as little as possible, never intentionally. And if she's hurt by you needing a no contact, she will deal with it. She will deal with it. This thing where the stepdad has to, well, I see. He has to come and tell you that she wants to see you. I don't know, the way it was phrased, it just didn't sound like she was over it going, I really want to talk to you. If we went to a family therapist, could I talk to you? I would like to, redo this conversation. That would be more direct, but I just think you need to be in counseling with your mom. You're an adult, so you know what you need. Well, you get to decide anyway, even if you don't know yet what you need or what you want. That's normal. It's just totally normal. And especially with CPTSD, because of all the damage to our perception and clarity, about where is the boundary? Is it just me, or do I have a right to expect X kind of treatment? There's a lot of confusion about that, but you'll be practicing that with other people in your life and being stronger and clearer about what makes sense for you. And certainly at my point in life, I look back on times where I was struggling with similar dilemmas. And it goes different ways in how I feel about it now. Sometimes I wish I hadn't been so hard-hearted. Sometimes I wish I'd gotten the heck out of there much sooner. But it gets clearer. It does get clearer over time, and for people who work on themselves. So I think you're doing a great job. I encourage you to let a little more time pass before you decide what to do. But keep in mind, even if you decide one thing and you realize quickly that that was the wrong decision, you can change your mind. You can change your mind. So if you want to keep the no contact going, and then at some point in the future, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or, oh, I'm ready now, then you can proceed. If you decide to go ahead and hang out with her or go to family therapy, but the minute you're there, you get the dread feeling again, just like, oh, why did I do this? You can change your mind. You can do that. I recommend always that when we have to set a boundary with people who are kind of damaged themselves, and it sounds to me like she is, there's some kind of personality thing going on there with her, that we are as gentle as we need to be in order to be clear. So sometimes if I need to sever ties with somebody forever or temporarily, there's probably 25 reasons I could give. And you do this and you do that, and I just can't stand when this happens. But instead of that, I can say one thing or two things that make it clear. I'm for real. This is the gist of the reason. And they understand what it is. And so they at least have the the answer that they seek. Because just as people, when someone does want to cut contact with us, of course the question comes, but why? But why? What was it? Was it this? Was it that? And for those of us who have fear about ourselves, which is everybody with trauma, probably everybody, but especially us, if we are left to speculate why somebody didn't want contact with us, we trip out and we start guessing it's all this stuff that we fear is not good of us. It's like, it's because I'm fat, right? It's because of this. It's because, yeah. So I do that. That's why I do my daily practice techniques, because my mind generates a lot of reasons when I'm trying to understand, in your case, why is she treating you that way? I think you're pretty clear that you haven't wronged her, but I think you're having doubts about whether you could have handled this better. So that's a really responsible kind of thing to ask yourself. Is there a way I could have handled this better? And that just because you recognize that maybe we should have gone better or you had handled things differently does not mean you have to rush out this second and try to, throw together your new response to it. It's really more through your own growth and having peace with a decision about a small step you'd like to take that's most likely to go well. Now remember, it's not like black and white. You don't have to have no contact or full contact. You can have a little bit of contact. You can start there and see how it goes. And I know with certain people, she sounds like somebody who really has trouble with boundaries, other people's boundaries. So that could be hard for her. Like, what do you mean you'll only have coffee with me? Why can't we have lunch and then dinner and take a vacation together? So you get to start it small and just kind of see how it goes and stop and check in with yourself. How do I feel about that? How do I feel about that? Yeah, and that's what we call titration. It's a medical term for when you do a little at a time of something, see how it goes, try a coffee, see how it goes. I think it's a good model for dating too. First date, not good to take a weekend trip together. Have a coffee, see what happens. If that goes well, then next week have lunch. Titration, little at a time. So I really wish you well with that. I hope you can heal this rift with your mom, even though it sounds like there's certain things going on with her that are never going to change, that she's always going to be, it's likely, always be a tender soul that's kind of emotionally mature and blames you for her feelings and is struggles to be there for you. But still, it's your mom, and a love of your mom and a mom's love of you is something worth trying to have and protect if you can. So I wish you well. If anybody's wondering how to set boundaries with difficult people, and this is for you, Alex, too, I have this free download called Ninja Boundaries, and you can click on it and get it right now, right here, and find out how you can really hold the line, and I will see you very soon.